Guys, as for this video, all the comments in the previous video were saying you didn't address any of the points or evidence that he's brought up. Did you even watch Morj's video? Now listen, I have nothing against Morj personally. Honestly, I don't even know the guy at all, but I will stand by and say that this is one of the worst theories in the One Piece community. Most of his original points from his first video don't hold up anymore, and many of the initial points were also just straight up factually wrong. Today I will dive in and dissect each and every one of Morj's points from the raid failing theory. I will explain why this theory is so flawed and why many of his points don't have a direct correlation to the raid's success, and also what has simply already been proven wrong since this is a 3-year-old theory at this point. I understand that Morj has said that he's going down with the ship, and that's fine, but continuing to feed this theory by finding new ways to justify it when most of the original core reasons for the theory existing in the first place don't hold up at all, I see this as Morj grasping for anything for this theory to stay alive. And I've come to the conclusion that Mr. Morj wants the raid to fail because it's based on his personal opinion and bias that the raid failing will make the story of Wano or One Piece better. I could be wrong, but that's my take on all of this. With all that being said, let's get into Morj's 3-year raid failing theory and break down each one of his points he brings up and see if they truly hold up and still have relevance in the current state of Wano. Mr. Morj starts out his raid will fail video by saying there is absolutely no chance that the Fire Festival ends in success. And look where the Straw Hats are now. They've gotten their matchups, they've won, and we're down to Luffy versus Kaido. There's also Big Mom, but the entire goal of the raid was to defeat Kaido and free Wano from the disgusting rule over the country. So I would say it's been pretty successful up to this point, and claiming that there is absolutely no chance is just out of the realm of possibilities at this point, because Luffy, whether you like it or not, does have a clear chance at full strength. Kaido may be stronger, but we all know that Luffy can come up extremely clutch in these situations. Next, Morj goes on to talk about how don't believe everything you read. His point is essentially stating how Oda uses misdirection to give us shocking, memorable moments, and he also brings up the idea that Oda can hype something up and not deliver on it for years to come. He uses Fishman Island as an example. Many people believe that Fishman Island will be coming after Sabaody. The problem with this though is that Oda is notorious for misdirection, but I think almost everyone would agree that Oda is even more notorious for his legendary foreshadowing. So by combining Oda's tendencies and patterns, we can use this to try and predict the story. Because when you actually look at the repetitive patterns Oda uses in his story arcs, especially the big ones, you will see examples and evidence of the Straw Hats winning their fights and Luffy defeating the final boss much more often than the Sabaody situation where the Straw Hats were wiped out. So much so that the only hyped up battle in One Piece that failed when the Straw Hats were with Luffy was Sabaody. Also, there has been so much foreshadowing to the night of the raid being the moment where the new generation pirates will finally defeat Kaido, as I stated in my first video. If you want more information on that, you can go and check it out. And when you look at a situation like Sabaody, there wasn't as much foreshadowing for Luffy losing against the Bards. And Sabaody was also the beginning of the Marineford saga, not a conclusion to one like Wano. Morj even brings up that Wano is a super saga and that this has been hyped up since the New World began with connections to Doflamingo and Caesar. So yeah, Oda loves to break our necks, but he can also still do this with reveals during Onigahima and after towards the end of Wano, like in Water 7 saga or Marineford. Then Morj goes on to bring up a point about how almost every arc has a failure point. He even brings up how Brook and Nami were captured in Whole Cake Island, and in Thriller Bark we have Luffy and Nami were captured, same thing in Alabasta. It might not be halfway through the arc, but we definitely have the same moment. Luffy was not only captured, he was one-shotted by Kaido, then brought to a prison where you explode if you try taking off the handcuffs. Not only was Luffy captured, but the other two most powerful captains were captured as well, Kid and Law. So I don't understand how we have this moment and then Morj continues to make more and more videos attempting to justify his theory. Law is in what seems to be a torture situation with Hawkins, and then Luffy fights Big Mom, and then Big Mom and Kaido end up teaming up to make it all worse. It all seems like it's going downhill here, and I think the most important thing to remember is that one scene where Kaido and Luffy originally fought, Kaido is completely fodderizing everyone in that town, and we even seen him shoot a hyper beam of tech that appears to vaporize Nami, Chopper, Sanji, Bippo, and a bunch of the other characters in one shot. And then Luffy gets one-shotted. So Luffy starts thinking in his mind, he's probably thinking, this entire town just got massacred, Kaido just killed all my friends while simultaneously taking off the entire top of a mountain, and then I just got one-shot and now I'm in prison. Come on man, all of that in one moment, that's a lot to take in. And yeah, in hindsight we know they didn't die, but at the moment Luffy was pissed off for a reason. You also have Zoro dicking around, nowhere to be found, getting lost in the mountains, and then we have a traitor reveal. Kanjuro backstabs the alliance, so now we're all like, okay, the plan is all ruined. Kanjuro told Orochi and Kaido all about it, it will definitely not be a surprise. And then we also have a situation where it appears as if the Alliance isn't going to show up, adds a lot of drama, and Momo gets kidnapped, a lot of drama right there. So I mean, so much went wrong in this time. So much drama, especially when Sengoku is hyping up the Big Mom and Kaido team up, and this was the moment where Morj should have thought about this theory. This is that moment that he is talking about. It's actually exactly that moment because the 3 most important characters of the Alliance got captured. And I know that Morj has clearly stated that he wants to go down with the ship, kind of hinting to an idea that this actually might not happen. When he once said that there is no way the raid will be a success, now he's saying he will go down with the ship. So now he's admitting there's a possibility, and honestly it's really likely that the raid will not fail. But in the end, it was Morj's own point that ended up backfiring on this theory. Also, Morj goes on to call all of this a bump in the road, and I'm not sure how you came to this conclusion. I've just explained everything that has gone wrong, but okay, moving on to the next point. Next, Morj says that Kaido defeats Luffy way too early. He says it's usually the midpoint, and like I've addressed, yes, this is true, it is usually the midpoint, but if you think about it chronologically, it isn't that early because we ended up getting the entire Reverie chapters in between, and then an entire Oden flashback, so that was around 20, I think 15 to 20 chapters if you combine both. Next we have Morj's Act 5 structure point, because Kabuki theaters generally have 5 acts, and I will say this is a fair assumption to make. Now what's not a fair assumption to make is assuming that tragedy means the raid fail. These two do not equivalate to each other. You can have a tragedy without the entire raid failing. You can have a tragic or overall more intense moments or high moments that will lead into Act 4, but that does not mean in any way that the raid will fail. I don't know how he linked these two together. It's a complete logical fallacy. Going from one to the other and correlating the two together, I don't get it. I just don't get it. Think about it this way. It's an NFL quarterback, we're playing great, then I throw a pick 6. Okay, so I made a huge, massive mistake, but it's a much closer game than I wanted it to be. But what's more important is that we win the game in the end. Coming up close in the 4th quarter is always the most important thing. So my point is that just because something goes wrong, just how something didn't go as it intended, just because something bad happens, does not mean everything goes to shit. If you got a calm head on your shoulders, you got confidence, it really won't affect you as much as if you're someone who has no confidence. Luffy is the most confident character in the world. If something goes wrong, he still has faith in his allies that they're going to come out on top. So like I said, it's a massive logical fallacy, because saying that one leads to the other or this equals to that, when it doesn't, it's a leap in logic. And then we also have Act 4. Acts 2 to 4 are action packed, right? So why is it such a stretch to say that Act 4 would just be a final showdown between Luffy and Kaido, and maybe we get Big Mom involved a little as well? Well, Morj would say this is not the way it's going to go, and that's because he thinks Wano will be at least 200. He says it's going to be 200 plus chapters. Morj goes on to say that the big bad must be defeated in a better location. He says Onigahima is too isolated, and I think Morj has even admitted that this point has been proven wrong. But let's just go into why this was always a bad point in the first place. Actually, I'm not even going to say that it was not only a bad point, it's just an untrue point. This just has no factual evidence behind it. He's just really talking out of his ass for this point specifically. He says the people of the island need to experience the moment. First up, Wano is not just one island, it's like 7 islands shoved together. So it's a much different situation compared to the other arcs as far as geography wise. And that point that Morj brought up is not even true, because in Alabasta, the only reason that people experienced the moment between Luffy and Crux was because Luffy threw Crux through a collapsing ancient building into the sky with the final knockout punch. Previous to that, no one was watching Crux and Luffy's fight, not even Vivi was there. And if I remember correctly, the only ones that saw was Cobra and maybe Nico Robin. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but then in hindsight, this is also the worst point because we have the greatest stage in all of One Piece set up right now. A levitating island with a giant Onigashima head, where Kaido, an Oni residing and controlling Wano from this island. We have a fire festival, just an overall a great tone, a great scenario, and it's honestly just lit as hell. And on top of that, we have the rooftop, right? There is a reason why the term roof piece exists. It's the hypest shit ever. And then you have characters like Marco hyping up the stage, saying lines like, "It's time for the stars to take the stage." And on top of everyone, you have the leader of the Straw Hat Alliance, Luffy, versus Kaido, the leader of the Beast Pirates, in an ultimate 1v1 showdown for Wano's future. Also, you have a battle of will, which is also going on, one of the main themes of Kaido's character and in Wano overall. And then you also have Kaido saying he chose Wano for a reason, and where does he choose to reside? That's right, Onigashima. a place where Marco also said that Kaido changed the name. And I would argue that the rooftop on the floating Oni Head Island is the greatest stage ever built up in an arc of One Piece, hands down. A perfect place for a final clash between two characters. You also have added stakes that Kaido could nuke the citizens with Onigashima. Narratively, the themes surrounding Kaido make it the best possible stage. From a hype level, there is nothing close to this in One Piece. But then I also want to just give you another example, Whole Cake Island, right? Luffy literally fought Katakuri in a pocket dimension. No one witnessed that fight. No one even cared about that except for Luffy and Katakuri. It was a really important battle. Even the newspaper were talking about like Luffy is a Yonko now. He defeated Katakuri. But yeah, like no one witnessed that except for a few people in Big Mom's crew. Morj even brings up Skypiea and Arlong Park, which Arlong Park I kind of understand, but Skypiea, I mean, the only thing anyone saw from a few characters was a giant shadow. Wiper and Nami saw it. No one else witnessed the fight, and guess what? Just like Wano, Skypiea was in the sky, and not just in the sky. There was no one that could have seen this because Luffy punches NL into a belt that is past the clouds of Skypiea on top of a giant beanstalk, and you're also fighting on top of a floating ship. There's no one that can witness this fight. Literally no one besides Wiper and Nami saw this. And then with Arlong, like I said, that's a valid point, but to act like this always happens is just flat out wrong. It doesn't happen all the time. It can happen occasionally. This stage does not need to be in the center of everyone. It happens sometimes. Look at Dressrosa, right? Dressrosa, they were climbing up the tower, and then finally the final punch where Luffy has to charge up for like 10 minutes. That final punch everyone saw, but for the most part, they did not see the fight. And Morj has conceded this point, but even from the beginning, this was already a terrible point. Because Arlong Park, everyone's watching it, you don't really see everything between Luffy and Arlong's fight because the final moments were inside a building where Nami used to map everything out. I mean, there's just countless examples of almost no one seeing parts of these fights and a lot of these fights. I just don't see how this point in any way would lead Morj to believing that the raid will fail. And I think the biggest example of this is Enies Lobby, right? Because where Luffy fought Rob Lucci in a giant tower all the way at the top again, where I'm pretty sure no one could see what was going on because it was so high up. I mean, you literally have Marines constantly asking, what is happening? What the hell is going on over there? And the only people who saw a lot of the fight was Usopp, Frankie, I think, maybe Zoro and a few others. Only thing that people saw was the end result because Luffy destroyed all the walls, destroyed the tower, reduced it to rubble, and then when the dust finally clears, you saw that Luffy won. But no one saw any of the fight besides that. And if Luffy didn't destroy that tower, then no one would have saw. And then we move on to the next point. Morj says that everyone has to resonate with this. And that can still happen. Luffy could throw Kaido off the island just like he did at Crux, and the people in Wano will celebrate no matter what. Just an announcement from Momo and Hiyori about Kaido's defeat would be enough to make everyone celebrate across the country. And with Kaido making Onigashima levitate and threatening to use it as a nuke, already proved this point wrong, and Morj has conceded it. Morj also says that the raid and Luffy was too lighthearted. He says that this is not the same Luffy who is staring down the Tower of Justice, declaring war on the world. Well, to this I would say that you're right. Luffy isn't the same. Ace's death was Luffy's one massive failure in the story, and since then Luffy has been completely confident. His 2 years of training has led him to be a much more confident and powerful character. This Luffy in Onigashima is a different breed. He is here to prove that he is Yonko material, and also Luffy is not sweating it because he knows he will win. He has pure confidence. He can defeat Kaido. And Morj says that Luffy's confidence was not shaken when he was one-shotted by Kaido. Well, Luffy's confidence is almost never shaken. It's never been. He never had doubts he could defeat Katakuri, Doflamingo, Arlong, Rob Lucci. Maybe the viewer did, but Luffy, he's just not a character who has his confidence shaken. And the point of Luffy versus Kaido is that battle is a battle of wills. Kaido wants to destroy everyone's wills to test them and find out who the true Joy Boy is. But Luffy always bounces back stronger than ever. He always bounces back stronger than before. He learns from each fight and adapts, and he gets stronger and stronger as we go on. I mean, when in the series have you ever seen Luffy's confidence shaken? Like truly shaken? Have you ever seen that? The answer is no, because the only time when Luffy's confidence was truly shaken was when Ace died. And this was after the war ended because then he could actually think about what was going on. Before that, Luffy's confidence was not shaken by any of the characters that he's fought. Luffy always knows that he can win if he just gets another chance. If he just gets back up, he'll always get back up. That's the whole point of Luffy's character. And that's honestly the biggest theme within this arc, specifically within the Onigashima battle. Morj says that Marco is set up to be a get out of jail free card, and this is a reason why the raid will fail. We've already seen Marco's roles in the raid. He has fought both Queen and King at the same time, killed many characters, and given us some amazing insight to the Lunarian race. Morj says that because the alliance is going in fully stacked with no last minute saves means that the raid will end in a failure. But really what all this does is raise the stakes even higher because you have to get it done here in Onigashima. And when you think about the nuke, right, there's basically a nuke gonna drop on an island. Well, this also is just to raise the stakes even more. Momo has to get his one clutch moment because he hasn't done anything in Wano, right? He has to have his big moment to save Wano because he's going to become the next ruler. So things like this are just to raise the stakes. If you know that there's no one to save you, you have to get it done here and now. The way I see it is that if they don't defeat Kaido here in Onigashima, it will not be another opportunity because these guys can't live with that, man. That's not gonna happen, right? So they're going to get it done here and now. Morj says, what is the significance of Toki? And I would say that is a valid question. I do agree that's a valid question. I think I do actually answer this question in my previous video, as I view Toki and Oden as characters of prophecy. You can go and check out my previous video on the raid failing, but I basically just state that we spend so much time with Oden and Toki because they're the only characters who can truly make these prophecies, and specifically when it comes to Wano, they know the outcome of Wano's future. The Void Century is important since Toki is from the Void Century, and Oden may have told her some things from it as well, what he learned with Roger. And we all know that you can't predict the future without knowing the history, a line from Sengoku that he brings up specifically when referencing Oden. Morj also starts bringing up unresolved plot points, and this is why I really start to disagree with him because unresolved plot points are quite frankly a staple in One Piece. Why is Luffy so obsessed with freedom? Or how about what on earth happened between Shanks and Kaido? Or how about Little Oars Jr.? Is he still alive? Is he still kicking it? What about the fight between Aokiji and Akainu? Zoro's, we got Zoro's Eye to talk about. What is going on with Zoro's Eye? Why didn't Robin bring up Sabo to Luffy before Dressrosa? So many questions, right? You got Captain Jones' treasure, the Three-Eyed Clan, the importance of the moon in One Piece and Wano, Alabasta's ancient weapon, and Pluton. I mean, think about Alabasta, right? This whole saga was because Croc wanted the ancient weapon. And when we're done with Alabasta, we don't know anything about it. We still don't know anything about the weapon in Alabasta. Same thing with Water 7. We have to get rid of Iceberg and Frankie because they have the weapons. What happens? Frankie burns it, and we never really learn anything about Pluton, so it's not like that was resolved. There's a lot of things in One Piece. Mysteries, you got a lot of things going on. So much characters that were introduced so far back, we don't know anything about them. There are so many examples of plot points that are presented in an arc and not resolved by the end of it. So this expectation that we have to resolve every single plot point that was introduced in Wano is just absurd. It's completely insane. Morj brings up Zoro's Shimotsuki past, which now we have some flashbacks and add elements to go on with Zoro's past in Onigashima. I do agree I want to see more with Zoro. I do agree with that. But I would have to ask, what about Sanji? Because Sanji, his connection to Germa didn't just end in Whole Cake. Even now we're getting more massive information about the Ray suit, possible Lunarian Aspire enhancements, Sanji being a cyborg, and overall, just his whole past with Germa being an extremely important part of his character in Wano, and with his battle with Queen specifically. So when Morris talks about Zoro's lineage and correlates it to the success or failure rate of Onigashima and the raid as a whole, I'm just thinking that does not add up. Zoro's character not being explored enough literally has almost nothing to do with the raid's success. This goes on with many other plot points and characters he brings up as well. And just like I said, if Sanji can get an entire arc about his connection to Germa, and then we get even more about that now in Wano hundreds of chapters later, the same thing could happen for Zoro down the line of the next arc. If a story like One Piece where Oda gives you little hints and glimpses with possible reveals sprinkled in, I just don't understand why Morris would not expect anything different from Onigashima and Wano as a whole. But the worst example of this is Morris bringing up Yamato's character multiple times. Yamato has been introduced, and for a series like One Piece where we have examples of characters like Nico Robin who were introduced in Whiskey Peak, and we don't get any kind of resolution to their character until Ina's lobby where we see a flashback. And we didn't know anything about Robin, but we slowly learn more and more and more. Then we get a massive reveal in so many arcs down the line. And this isn't just with Robin, this has happened many times. You know, with Jinbei, right? We didn't know anything about Jinbei. He joins up and we think he's gonna join the crew or whatever, man. But we don't see Jinbei until Fishman Island. Then it's like, okay, well now we're gonna get him. And Whole Cake still doesn't join up. And then we finally have Jinbei and Wano again. So, you know, like a character like Jinbei, you got Sanji, the same thing like I said, where we now we're getting into Sanji's character more and more. Even in Wano, which doesn't really have anything to do with Sanji. And then we have characters like Croc and Ace. You know, you learn more about them as time goes on. And I think personally, my favorite example of what I'm talking about here is Nami. You know, Nami, we learn little about her, barely anything. We can tell that Oda's hinting at things but really, it all came together in Arlong Park, multiple arcs down the line. I mean, even characters like Kobe, where we know nothing about Kobe, like we literally know nothing about him, and it's like 1,000 chapters later. What has he been doing this whole time, right? So, you know, there's a lot going on with these characters, and I just don't think you can assume that these characters will be resolved immediately. What does Yamato's character being underexplored have to do with the successful raid of Onigashima? This arc is not focused on Yamato. She was just introduced pretty recently, and at the end of the day, this arc is about Luffy defeating Kaido. It's not about Yamato, and most importantly, he will take back Wano and open the borders. And I actually do have to give Morj credit because he actually did point something out that I would say I agree with as well. You can never assume a character is dead in One Piece, but the problem with that though is I just can't take Lord Orochi seriously. I never seen him as an actual threat. And then we have Morj saying that setup is not actually about the number of chapters. And, you know, I agree with Morj here, I do. Setup is not about the number of chapters. But then he brings up Arlong Park, which is just a poor example of this because Arlong Park was being set up all the way back in Orange Town. You can clearly see little hints of setup when you first are introduced to Nami. So it may not be a long setup for hundreds of chapters like Marineford or like Wano, but it is still, for the beginning of One Piece, a really decent amount of setup. A lot of time and chapters were actually set up to get into that final reaction, and it really hits hard when you see Luffy put his treasure on Nami's head. Morj brings up how everyone would agree that Ace dying after being set up for Luffy to save Ace was better for the story moving forward. Now, a few things here. Ace's death is so much different because Luffy did not have his crew in Marineford. Luffy wasn't the leader of the side he was fighting for, and this fight was between the Whitebeard pirates and the Marines. Everyone else here was fighting for these two sides, but with some warlords doing as they please, and then Luffy also just going in there trying to save Ace. But this battle was really just more of a loss for Whitebeard and the Whitebeard pirates. And yeah, Luffy does have a personal connection to Ace, but as far as the two factions, Luffy was thrown into the mix. More importantly, when it comes to this point, I must ask, how would Kaido not being defeated at the raid, how would that make the One Piece, or how would it make the Wano story better? This is Morj's subjective opinion, and that's my problem with this theory, because if you're basing it around what you want to happen and what you think is better for the story, that is a subjective opinion. Ace dying actually does make the story better because Luffy is now forced to go into a 2-year training arc. It's a personal loss that the main character is suffering. Is a little added element of drama going to make the entire story of Wano and Onigashima infinitely better, as Morj says? He said infinitely better, and I would say no. It might make it slightly less predictable, or you might think it makes it a little better, but overall the story of One Piece would not be affected the same way it was with Ace's death. The Straw Hats losing the raid and failing at the raid would not impact the story of One Piece the same way. So I just don't think it's fair to bring these two into the same conversation. First of all, Ace's death was at the end of the saga, and if you're saying that the raid failing would be the midpoint or the dramatic shift halfway through Wano, that is nothing like Ace dying at the end of the arc. You see what I'm saying? So you just can't compare the two. And like I said, you know, they already got captured. That's already happened. I've been over this. And the raid will be successful if Luffy defeats Kaido. That's really all it comes down to. Like I said, I agree with Morj that Zoro, Yamato, these characters need to be explored more, and their connections to Wano as well. And I think there's another point that Morj has brought up recently that I think was actually a very interesting point. And maybe that's just because it didn't have the chance to be proven wrong yet, but let's talk about the Awakened Zone. So it's really a great idea to bring this up because it's such a unique detail that was brought up in Impel Down all the way back there, and that is the idea that awakened zones can be revived and will always get back up. Now this is the kind of evidence that I love to see in a One Piece theory, and I have to say props for this, man. I actually do think this is a very interesting point. So not really much to criticize or argue with here, you know, I do think it does have a good point. But I would say though, it doesn't mean the raid will fail, and even Morj mentions this, that it doesn't mean the raid will fail. And another thing to add is that there is still very powerful characters like Jinbei, Frankie, who have a lot in the tank. You know, I mean, Frankie and Jinbei, okay, like come on man, they did not even really break a sweat. Like it does seem like they broke a sweat, but their fights were just so easily won. So even if the Toby Robo did get up, I'm sure that Jinbei could take on a few of these dudes, as well as characters like Momo, who is now in a prime form, man. He's in his strength, the prime strength of his life, and can transform into a giant dragon. Momo could definitely deal with that. Got a lot of characters who could deal with these Toby Robos and everything. At the end of the day, this is not a personal attack on Morj. Your believers are telling me, go look into his points, man. You didn't even look at his videos. I've watched all of the videos. I mean, like, come on, man. I'm breaking down each of these points, and let's just be honest, these points have been proven wrong already. They're outdated, and the basis and the overall reason for your theory even existing in the first place is just wrong. And let's talk about what a theory actually means. A theory means that you gotta have evidence, man. You gotta provide evidence and proof, or at least some form of evidence. You know, you can't just go in here and say, oh, I want this to happen, it would be better for the story, and that is the basis for your theory happening. A lot of believers in this theory will say all of this was based off Morj studying One Piece and Oda's tendencies and patterns. But honestly, I disagree, because if you look at it, a lot of his points actually prove the opposite. A lot of his points actually prove him wrong. They worked against him in a lot of situations. And really what I'm trying to get across here is, like, I kind of do like the idea of the awakened zones, because that's evidence. That's evidence of what Oda actually specifically told you in the story of what was going to happen. But overall, the original Morj theory of the raid failing was not based on any concrete evidence, and the small amounts of evidence or possibilities that he could have for the raid failing have already been destroyed. So when your original video holds no weight, it just doesn't hold up. Like, go look at all those points. They've already been proven wrong, or Morj was just already flat out wrong on some of the things he was saying, like where every stage has to be for everyone to see. Like, that's just not true. And like when Morj said that the failing point hasn't already happened, when he talks about people getting captured, and you have 3 captains already getting captured as he's saying this, like, you know, so a lot of the stuff just didn't hold up from the beginning, and the rest of it that did already got proven wrong. Anyways, guys, let me know, what do you think? Will the raid fail? Will it succeed? Do you have trust in Luffy or Kaido? Who are you betting on? Because that's really what it comes down to at this point. Let me know, what are the chances for the succession, and don't forget to have a great day.